The star station floated in the darkness of space like a shining ring. Lights from hundreds of ships painted its outer walls in bright colors. It was the Orion Trade Hub, the place where many different species came to meet, trade, and speak. Inside the great halls, the air carried voices in many languages. Every sound echoed off the silver walls. Rian walked through the long corridor of the station with calm steps. He was a human, dressed in a dark travel coat with a small emblem on his chest. The emblem carried the symbol of the Earth's Union, a reminder that he was not just a visitor. He was a representative. The air of the station felt cold against his face. Around him moved creatures of many kinds. Some were tall, with glowing skin. Some were short with soft fur. Others moved like liquid shapes. It was a place where no one truly felt alone, yet no one fully belonged. Rian had been sent on this mission for one reason. The Velen had agreed to attend the Trade Council. They were an old and distant race. They were known for their silence and their strict way of life. They never laughed. They never cried. They spoke in calm tones, but every word they spoke carried weight. No one on the council understood them well. They never allowed anyone close. But humans had recently gained attention because they were different. They spoke with emotion. They smiled. They shared their feelings freely. Rian was chosen because of his calm nature and soft way of speaking. As he reached the central dome, Rian stopped. The hall stretched wide like the inside of a crystal sphere. Transparent walls showed the stars outside. The floor reflected the light from the ships passing near the station. At the center stood the star map, a massive sphere of light showing thousands of star systems. People from different worlds walked around it, studying routes, trade lines, and hidden corners of the galaxy. Rian looked at the map, but then his eyes caught something else. Near the far edge of the glowing sphere stood a woman. She was tall, with silver blue skin that reflected the starlight like water. Her eyes were bright, violet. Her hair was pale and long, falling like smooth silk to her shoulders. She wore a dark suit with silver lines on the collar. She stood straight, quiet, as if nothing in the room could touch her. Rian recognized her immediately. She was Valend. No one stood near her. Everyone kept their distance. The Velen were not like the other species. They did not like close company. They believed emotion made them weak. Yet Rian had studied their history before the mission. He knew that, under their cold faces, they carried stories older than most species in the galaxy. Rian took a small breath. His heart beat steady. He started walking toward her. A few nearby traders gave him confused looks. Some whispered to each other. No human ever walked up to a Velen without permission. But Rian did not stop. He moved slowly, without hurry, making sure she could see him. The woman turned her head slightly when she sensed his presence. Her eyes met his. They were sharp and still, like clear stone. She did not speak. She did not move away. She only watched him approach. Rian stopped at a respectful distance. He raised his hand slightly, a small gesture humans used to greet. "Hello?"
"Hi."
Rian said in a steady voice. The woman tilted her head. Her people did not use greetings like humans did. To them, a greeting was a waste of words. Still, she did not turn away. "You are human," she said at last. Her voice was smooth, cold, and controlled. "Yes," Rian answered. "I am Rian, from Earth." The woman lowered her gaze back to the glowing map. Her fingers moved through the air, tracing a line between two bright stars. "Humans speak many words," she said. "Sometimes too many," Rian replied with a soft smile. Her eyes shifted to him again. "We do not use many words. Words should carry weight. Humans speak and fill space with air. Why do you do this?" Rian placed his hands behind his back. "Because words carry feeling for us. They make distance smaller. They make strangers feel less like strangers." The woman did not answer at once. Her eyes returned to the map. Rian watched the way the light touched her skin. She seemed carved out of moonlight. It was not a thought he spoke out loud. It was just something he felt. But feelings had always been part of who he was. You are not afraid to speak to me, she said finally. Should I be? Rian asked. Many are, she replied. My people are not trusted. We are too quiet for those who like sound. Rian took a slow step closer. He did not want to break her space. He wanted to understand. Silence is not something to fear, he said. Silence can be honest. For a brief moment, the woman's eyes softened. It was hard to notice. To anyone else, it might have looked the same. But Rian saw the tiny shift. He saw how her shoulders moved just a little. He knew he was not standing before a wall. He was standing before a person who had learned to hide her heart behind calm stone. What is your name? Rian asked. Lyra? She said. Lyra? He repeated softly. The sound of it felt smooth on his tongue. She raised her brow slightly. You speak my name like it means something. It does, Rian said. Every name means something. Lyra turned back to the map. For us, a name is only a mark. It has no feeling. For us, a name carries a story, Rian said. When I say your name, I remember the moment I met you. That moment becomes part of the name itself. Lyra stayed silent again. Rian did not push her. He let the quiet surround them. Around them, other voices filled the hall, but inside their small space, there was a stillness. The star map showed a cluster of systems near the edge of Velen space. Rian noticed her eyes resting on it for a long time. Is that your home? He asked. She nodded once. Our home is quiet. Few visit. Few are welcomed. It is better that way. Do you like it there? She paused. It was not a question she had heard often. It is home. Liking or not liking does not change that. Rian tilted his head slightly. I think it does. Home is not only a place. It is how it feels when you stand there. Lyra's fingers stilled on the light. She stared at the glowing star cluster. Her people had never spoken this way. They lived by rules. They did not share emotions. She felt something strange growing in her chest. It was not fear. It was not pain. It was something softer, something she could not name. She looked at him again. Humans speak of feeling as if it is strong. It is strong, Rian said. It connects what nothing else can. For a heartbeat, their eyes met. Neither spoke. The sound of distant ships filled the hall. Lyra opened her mouth as if to speak again, but no words came. She felt unsteady in a way she never had before. Rian took a slow breath. He stepped just a little closer. His voice lowered, calm and warm. You're beautiful, man whispered. The words fell into the air like a quiet spark. Lyra froze. Her breath caught. Her violet eyes widened, just slightly. She had heard many words in her life. Words of order. Words of logic. Words of law. But never words like this to the Velen. Beauty was something attached to art, to stars, to structures. Never to a person. It was not spoken to a living being. It was never spoken with warmth. She did not move. Her body stood still as if time itself had paused around her. The noise of the hall faded to the edge of her mind. Only his voice stayed. Her throat felt tight. She had no training for this moment. No rule existed to guide her answer. She felt heat rise beneath her silver skin. You speak with no care, she said finally, her voice softer than before. Rian shook his head slowly. I speak with care. That is why it matters. Lyra stared at him. Something in her heart shifted again. It was small, but strong. A soft alarm echoed across the dome, calling visitors to the next council session. People began to move toward the upper halls. Lyra stayed still for a second longer. She did not understand what she felt, but she knew this moment would not leave her mind easily. Rian stepped back respectfully. I will see you again, Lyra. She said nothing. But as he turned to walk away, she found her hand slightly moving toward him, a movement so small no one would have noticed. She lowered it before anyone could see. The light of the star map continued to glow. But for Lyra, the stars did not look the same anymore. The Great Council Chamber was a massive dome near the upper section of the Orion Trade Hub. Its ceiling was made of transparent crystal that showed the darkness of space above. Rings of light rotated slowly across the ceiling like calm rivers of gold. Representatives of many species filled the chamber. Some floated, some walked, and some stood perfectly still. A long round table stood in the center, shining with silver light. Rian entered the chamber with steady steps. He wore the same dark coat, but now the emblem of the Earth Union shone under the bright white lights. His heart beat fast, but his face remained calm. This meeting was important. It was the first time in many cycles that the Velen had agreed to speak in an open trade session. Humans had only recently been allowed to join these talks. He saw Lyra before anyone else. She stood near the Velen delegation table, straight and silent. Her silver-blue skin reflected the soft glow of the chamber. She wore a long, dark coat marked with thin lines of white. Her people stood around her in perfect formation. Their faces showed no emotion. Their movements were slow and measured. When Lyra noticed Rian, her violet eyes paused on him for a brief second. No one around her noticed this small moment, but Rian felt it like a spark. She quickly turned her gaze toward the council table. But the small shift in her eyes stayed with him. The council chair, a tall being with golden plates across its shoulders, raised a hand. The room fell quiet. A soft, low hum filled the chamber. Let this council begin. The chair spoke in a clear voice that echoed across the dome. Today we speak of the trade route between Velen's space and the outer human colonies. The question of open passage must be answered. Let all speak with reason.
The Velen leader stepped forward.
His name was Torin. His face carried the same calm stone expression as the rest of his people. His voice was deep and even. The Velen see no need for open routes. We protect our space. We wish no conflict, but we accept no unnecessary traffic. The representative from the minor colonies of Rasan spoke next. Open routes would allow trade to grow. The Velen worlds hold rare resources that could help the outer colonies. Our ships bring fair trade, not threat. A voice from the Avrix delegation joined in. But the Velen do not allow easy passage. They block routes, and we lose time and energy. This is not balance. The Velen leader replied in the same even tone. The safety of our space stands above your need for fast routes. You speak of trade. We speak of protection. That is not the same. The council chair raised a hand to keep the chamber calm. Rian watched the exchange carefully. It was not just about trade. It was about trust. The Velen were powerful. Their technology was older than most. They held strong defense fleets. Many feared them, but few tried to understand them. When the human turn came, the chair nodded to Rian. He rose slowly from his seat. All eyes turned to him. Humans do not seek to control Velen space, Rian said clearly. We seek to build a path between us. Trade is not only a matter of goods, it is a matter of trust. If no one reaches across the line, then the line becomes a wall, and walls grow higher with time. The Velen leader looked at him with a calm face. Humans speak of trust. Trust is not built with words. Trust is proven. We do not see proof. Rian took a slow breath. Then give us a chance to show it. We can build together if we start with one step. Okay, the chamber filled with low whispers from different species. Some agreed. Some shook their heads. The Velen were not known for changing their stance quickly. Lyra listened in silence. Her people stood still, but her mind moved like a river under ice. She heard Rian's voice. It was not the words themselves, but the way he spoke them. There was warmth in his tone. There was no demand, only a bridge reaching out. It reminded her of that moment by the star map when he had whispered something she could not forget. She tried not to think of it. But the memory came back clearly. The way his eyes had looked at her. The way the sound of his voice had touched something deep inside her that she never knew existed. She had tried to push it away, but the words stayed with her. Beautiful. It had no place in her world, yet it had rooted itself in her heart. The council chair called for short recess. The chamber filled with movement. Delegations stepped away to talk among themselves. Some walked toward the outer halls to speak in private. Lyra stayed near the Velen delegation. She felt her steps turning on their own. She found herself walking toward the far corner of the hall. Rian was there, standing near one of the tall, transparent walls that showed the stars. He noticed her before she could speak. His expression was calm but kind. "You spoke with boldness," Lyra said in a low voice. Rian nodded. "Sometimes boldness is needed." She tilted her head slightly. "The Velen do not change their minds easily. Your words may fall without echo, and they fall as truth," Rian said. "If no one tries, nothing changes." Lyra stared at the stars for a long moment. She felt a strange pressure in her chest. "You said something to me yesterday. A word that no one has spoken to me before." Rian kept his eyes on her. "I did." She took a breath. Her voice was steady, but her heart moved fast. "Why did you say it? Because it was true," Rian answered simply. Lyra looked at him. His face held no sign of mockery or doubt. It was plain honesty. Her people had no place for such personal words. The Velen spoke in facts and orders. They valued silence and strength. But this human had used a single word to create something she could not understand. "It has no meaning in my world," Lyra said softly. "It can have meaning if you let it," Rian replied. She lowered her gaze. "I do not know how to let it." He did not step closer, but his voice carried a gentle warmth. "Then start by not pushing it away." Their silence stretched. Around them, the council delegates moved like distant shadows. But in this corner of the chamber, it felt like a different world. Lyra felt the weight of the word again, and it was not a burden. It was something new. Before she could speak again, Torin, the Velen leader, called her name. His voice carried the authority of their people. She straightened and turned at once. "Lyra," Torin said, "the council will soon return. Prepare your report." "Yes, leader," she replied. Her voice carried the usual calm tone. Torin's cold eyes moved to Rian for a brief second. "Be careful with human words. They make the air soft." Rian did not react. Lyra followed Torin back to the delegation area, but the leader's words stayed with her. Human words make the air soft. He had meant it as a warning. Yet to her, it did not sound like something dangerous. It sounded like something alive. When the council resumed, tension grew heavier in the chamber. The Avrix and Rossin delegates spoke of open routes again. The Velen delegation repeated their old lines of protection and security. The discussion circled like a quiet storm with no end. Then something unexpected happened. Lyra rose from her seat. Her people turned to her with confusion. The Velen rarely allowed anyone but the leader to speak, but Torin gave a small nod. She stepped forward. Her hands were folded behind her back. Her face was calm, but inside her, something was burning. "Velen's space is protected for a reason," she said in a clear voice. "But protection should not mean isolation. We speak of threats, but we also speak of allies. If there is no bridge, then all we will ever see is distance." The chamber grew quiet. A Velen speaking like this was rare. Torin's eyes narrowed slightly, but he said nothing. Lyra continued. "The humans spoke of trust. I do not know if their words can carry it, but I know no trust can grow if we keep all doors closed." Her words carried no emotion on the surface, but to those who listened closely, there was something new in her tone. A soft strength. A seed of change. The council chair leaned forward. "Are you suggesting a test route, Lyra Velen?" "Yes," she said. "A single route. Monitored, guarded, but open." Murmurs filled the chamber. Some were shocked. Some nodded. Torin spoke next. "You suggest risk. Risk is not taken lightly in Velen space." "Risk is part of trust," Lyra answered. "If no step is taken, then we remain in the same place forever." Torin held her gaze. For the first time in a long while, the Velen delegation was divided between the past and something new. Rian watched her speak. He saw the strength in her voice. It was not the strength of a soldier. It was the strength of someone taking their first step into unknown ground. After long talks, the council chair called for a vote. One by one, delegates raised their hands or used their symbols. The test route was approved by a narrow margin. The Velen delegation left the chamber in silence. Lyra walked behind Torin. Her heart was beating fast. She did not know why she had spoken that way. She only knew that something inside her had shifted. When the Velen reached their private hall, Torin turned to her. "You broke silence," he said. "Yes," she answered. "You spoke like a human," he added. Lyra lifted her head. "Maybe silence does not always protect." Torin studied her for a moment. He gave no clear answer. Then he walked away, leaving her alone in the quiet hall. Rian found her outside later, near the same star map where they had first met. She stood alone, looking at the glowing stars. "You spoke with courage," Rian said. "I spoke with something I do not understand," Lyra replied. "Understanding is not always needed before a step," Rian said. "Sometimes you step first, then learn why it mattered." She looked at him. The stars reflected in her violet eyes. "Your word still sits in my mind." "It has not left. It was meant to stay," he said. The Orion trade hub had never been so full of noise. Ships came and went from every corner of space. Traders shouted across markets. Machines hummed along the station's outer ring. But among all the sounds, a single event echoed louder than any engine. The Velen had agreed to open one route. It was a small step, but it was something no one believed possible before. The news spread fast. The Avrix called it a beginning. The Rasan miners celebrated in their trade halls. Even the human ships sent signals of quiet pride. Everyone knew that change would not come in a single day, but the door that had been locked for so long had finally opened a little. Lyra stood alone in a quiet observation deck, watching the stars outside. Her violet eyes reflected the golden light from the station's outer rings. She placed her hand against the transparent wall and felt the faint vibration of passing ships. She had been raised to stand in silence, to keep emotions locked behind calm walls. But now her mind was no longer still. She thought of the council. She thought of Torin's cold voice. She thought of the faces of her people, half confused, half unsure. Most of all, she thought of the human who had spoken to her, not with command, not with fear, but with a soft word that had broken something inside her silence. Footsteps echoed behind her. She turned and saw Rian walking in. His coat brushed lightly against the floor as he came to stand beside her. His expression was calm as always, but there was a spark in his eyes. "You always find the quiet places," Rian said. "I was taught to think in silence." Lyra answered. "And now you stand in a storm of voices," he said. Lyra looked back at the stars. "It is strange. When I spoke at the council, it felt like something heavy inside me cracked open. I had never spoken against our leader before. I had never questioned the way of my people. I do not know why I did it." Rian folded his arms behind his back. "Because sometimes one voice can move an entire wall. You carried that voice. No one expected it, but you did." She tilted her head. "I do not feel strong. I feel like a wave against a mountain." He shook his head slightly. "Waves can shape mountains with time, Lyra. Let the silence stretch between them." She was not used to being seen like this. Among her people, showing doubt was a sign of weakness. But here, standing beside Rian, it did not feel like weakness. It felt like breathing for the first time. Behind them, the station's announcement system began to speak in many languages. It announced the preparations for the first test route between Velen space and human colonies. A joint crew would fly a single ship through the route to prove trust. The mission was voluntary. Rian listened carefully. His name was already on the list of pilots. He had agreed before the council's final vote. It was risky. If anything went wrong, the route would close again, and trust would fall apart. Lyra did not know yet, but she was also being considered. The Velen leader Torin had chosen her to observe the human ship and report. It was not a reward. It was a test. If she failed, she would be held responsible. Hours later, in the Velen assembly hall, Torin stood in front of his people. His tall frame cast a shadow on the bright walls. The room smelled faintly of star fuel and metal. The Velen delegates sat in silence, waiting for orders. "Lyra," Torin said. His deep voice filled the room like slow thunder. "You will join the human on the test route, She straightened her shoulders. Yes, leader. You will not act without our command, Torn continued. You will not speak freely. You will observe and report. If there is failure, it will fall on your shoulders. If there is success, it belongs to the Velen. Lyra did not flinch. I understand. Torrin's eyes stayed on her for a long moment. The human's voice carries something strange. Do not let it make you weak. Do not let soft words change who you are. She lowered her head slightly. Yes, leader. But inside, she knew something had already changed. The next day, the docking bay filled with lights. Engineers checked wires, drones floated through the air, and guards stood in neat lines. The joint ship was named Horizon Wind. It was a long silver craft with smooth curves and bright navigation lines. It carried both human and Velen technology. It was a symbol of trust, but it was also fragile. A single spark of mistrust could break it. Rian stood near the entry ramp with a datapad in his hand. His eyes scanned the system's list. But his mind was half on the mission and half on the thought of Lyra joining the crew. She arrived exactly on time. She wore a flight suit of dark silver with light blue stripes on the arms. Her hair was tied back neatly. She walked with the same straight posture, but her eyes no longer carried only cold. Ready to fly with a human, Rian said. Ready to make sure you do not crash the ship, she replied with a straight face. He smiled lightly. She almost smiled too, but stopped herself. It was not something Velen did in public. They stepped into the ship together. Inside, the corridors were narrow and clean. The air carried the faint scent of new metal and cold circuits. The control room was shaped like a half circle with large transparent panels showing the stars. 3 human crew members and 2 Velen technicians were already inside. Rian took the pilot's seat. Lyra sat in the co-pilot chair beside him. The others worked at their stations. A soft hum rose as the engines came alive. The station's voice echoed through the speaker. Horizon Wind, you are cleared for launch. Rian pushed the controls gently. The ship lifted off the dock like a bird stretching its wings. Outside, thousands of people watched from viewing decks. The station's lights reflected off the ship's silver hull as it moved into the open dark. Inside the control room, Lyra watched every small movement. She noticed the way Rian's hands touched the controls, not with force, but with careful ease. Humans were different from Velen pilots. Velen flew with strict rules, with no wasted movement. Rian flew like the ship was alive. You fly like you are dancing, Lyra said suddenly. Rian raised a brow. Dancing, yes. My people fly like soldiers. You fly like you are speaking to the ship. He laughed softly. Maybe I am. A ship listens, if you respect it. She turned back to the window. Strange way to fly. Strange ways can lead to new places, Rian said. Hours passed as the ship moved deeper into the test route. The stars changed outside. The Orion station faded behind them. They crossed navigation points that no ship had passed freely before. Every moment of the journey was being watched by hundreds of systems across the galaxy. Any mistake could cause disaster. Lyra worked with quiet focus. She checked sensor readings, calculated distances, and adjusted shields. The human crew spoke in calm voices. The Velen technicians spoke only when needed. But between Lyra and Rian, the silence was different. It was no longer cold. It was warm. Halfway through the route, the sensors began to beep. A signal appeared on the edge of the screen. What is that? Rian asked. Unregistered craft, one of the human crew answered. It is not on the list. It is moving fast. Lyra narrowed her eyes at the readings. The object was closing in from the left side. It was small, about the size of a cargo pod, but it moved like a hunter. Shields up, Rian ordered. Keep calm. The Velen technicians worked quickly. The ship's defense systems lit up. The unknown craft sent a pulse of energy across space. It was not a weapon, but it was strong enough to shake the ship slightly. Lyra tightened her grip on the armrest. It is testing us, Rian nodded. Then let us show it we are not weak. He guided the ship in a slow curve, keeping the craft at a safe distance. Lyra activated the scanner and sent a coded warning. The craft responded with silence. Then, suddenly, it turned and disappeared into a dark field near an asteroid belt. The crew let out a collective breath. That was not part of the plan. One of the human crew said. It was not an attack, Lyra said. It was a message. Someone is watching. Rian looked at her. Do you think it was one of your people? She shook her head slowly. I do not know. But the Velen do not use that signal. For the rest of the flight, the tension sat like a shadow in the control room. But Rian and Lyra kept their focus. When the ship finally reached the end of the route, a beacon flashed on the screen. They had made it. The route was clear. The station on the other end welcomed them with open channels. Cheers erupted from the human crew. Even the Velen technicians gave small nods. Lyra watched the stars as they slowed the ship. She felt a weight she had carried for years start to shift. Her people had always built walls around their space. Now she had crossed one. As the ship docked at the receiving station, Rian turned to her. You did well. She met his gaze. We did well. In that simple exchange, something stronger than trade had begun to grow. A bridge had formed between two worlds. When they returned to Orion Hub, crowds were waiting at the docking bay. The mission was declared a success. For the first time, human and Velen ships would share a route in peace. But while everyone celebrated, a single question remained in Lyra's mind. Who had sent the unknown craft, and why? As the cheering echoed through the station, she stood quietly at the edge of the dock. Rian joined her again. Something out there is watching, she said. He nodded slowly. Then we will be ready. Lyra looked at the stars. Her world was changing. She could feel it like a pulse in her chest. She did not know what the future held, but she knew one thing with certainty. The human had whispered a word that opened a door, and that door would never close again. The star station moved slowly around the bright blue sun. Light from the star filled every corridor with soft silver shine. Lyra walked through the main passage of the Velen quarters. Her steps were quiet but steady. Her mind was not silent. Thoughts moved fast, like running water. The word she had heard from Rian still stayed inside her. It was a simple word, but it had shaken the ground she had always stood on. Her people had no place for feelings like this. They followed order and logic. They never allowed something soft to grow inside. She reached the chamber of memory. It was a large round hall made of clear glass and soft white stone. A long glowing pillar stood in the center. Round it were hundreds of light rings that held the history of the Velen. She placed her hand on the pillar. The surface was cold. Her people always said cold meant strength. She had always believed it. But now that cold no longer felt strong. It felt heavy. The pillar showed her the old stories. Velen ships fighting old wars. Councils making perfect plans. Leaders standing without fear. There were no songs, no laughter, no art. Just structure and silence. She remembered Rian's face when he spoke the word beautiful. His eyes had not carried cold. They had carried warmth. That warmth made her heart feel alive for the first time. Lyra turned away from the pillar. She could not stay here. She needed air. She needed something different. She walked out of the chamber and moved through the long bridge that led to the human section of the station. Velen and humans had separate areas. Her people believed mixing too much would bring weakness. But she no longer cared about old lines. The human section felt different. The walls were painted with colors. There were small lights along the ceiling that changed with the time of day. She passed a group of human workers sitting together and eating. They laughed softly. The sound was strange to her. Her people spoke only what was needed. But here, people spoke because they wanted to share. She saw how their faces moved with emotion. It made the air feel warm. Rian stood near a wide window that showed the stars outside. He wore the same simple dark jacket. His hands rested in his pockets. His eyes watched the distant stars with quiet peace. When he noticed her walking toward him, a small smile touched his face. Lyra stopped in front of him. She felt something in her chest again, a soft and steady beat. It was not fear. It was not duty. It was something new. Rian spoke first. His voice was calm. You came here again? Lyra nodded. I needed to understand. Rian tilted his head slightly. Understand when she looked at the stars. When you spoke that word to me, I felt something I had never felt before. My people never taught me this. They told us feelings make us weak. But I did not feel weak. I felt alive. Cannot explain it in the way my people explain things. It is not logic. It is not code. Rian listened closely. He did not interrupt. He waited for her to find her own words. Lyra turned her face toward him. Her silver skin caught the light. Why did you say that word to me? Rian answered slowly. Because it was true. You look like something special. And when I see something special, I say it. Humans believe words can carry feeling. Feelings are not a threat to us. They give us strength. Lyra repeated the word in a soft whisper. Strength. Rian nodded. Yes. Strength does not always need to be cold or sharp. Sometimes strength is soft. Sometimes strength is in kindness. Sometimes it is in a single word. Lyra lowered her head. She felt warmth rise in her chest. She had never felt warmth like this. It was not from the station. It was from inside her. She looked up again. I want to understand this more. I want to know why this word can change so much inside me. Rian gave a small nod. Then I will show you. He walked toward a door at the end of the hall. Lyra followed him. The door opened into a wide room filled with art made by humans. There were paintings on the walls. Small sculptures stood on low platforms. A soft sound of a human instrument played in the air. It was a slow melody with gentle rhythm. Lyra stopped at the entrance. She had never seen a room like this. The Velen had no rooms for such things. Every space was for duty. But this room had no duty. It had only feeling. She stepped forward slowly. She looked at the paintings. Each one was different. One showed a bright sun over a green field. Another showed people holding hands under falling rain. The colors were strong. They felt alive. Rian walked beside her. This is what we humans call beauty. It can be in anything. A sound, a picture, a face, a moment. It is not about perfection. It is about what makes the heart move. When I saw you that day, standing near the star map, something in me moved. So I said it. Lyra looked at one painting of a wide ocean. She had never seen an ocean, but she could almost feel the cool wind and hear the water. She closed her eyes. She felt a soft weight in her heart, like something was opening slowly. She turned to Rian. My people will not understand this. They will call it weakness. They will call it useless. Rian looked at her with calm eyes. Every change starts with someone who dares to see the world in a new way. If you see it, maybe others will too. One word can open doors. She thought about the council. She thought about the faces of her people, always cold and still. She wondered what would happen if they heard this word the way she did. Maybe they would not understand at first, but maybe they would feel something. Rian walked to a small round table in the center of the room, and it was a simple flower in a glass container. Its red petals were soft and glowing under the light. This is a flower from Earth, he said. It is small, and it has no great power, but we still keep it with care, because it makes us remember beauty. Lyra stepped closer to the flower. She looked at its delicate shape. She raised her hand, but stopped before touching it. This is beauty. Rian smiled softly. Yes. And beauty is not only outside, it can also be inside someone. Even in someone who was told never to feel. She stayed silent for a moment. The music in the room filled the air like soft wind. For the first time in her life, silence did not feel empty. It felt full. Rian sat on a low seat near the flower. Lyra sat across from him. Her movements were slow, as if she was stepping into a new world. Rian spoke again. When I was a child, my teacher told me that beauty is a kind of light, not the kind that comes from stars, but the kind that comes from inside people. It makes dark places less cold, makes hard times easier to walk through. Your people are strong in many ways, but maybe they forgot this kind of light. Lyra felt his words reach deep into her. She had lived her whole life in a world where cold was a sign of power. She had never been told that light could live inside a person. She had never been told she had that light too. She whispered, I want them to see it. Rian looked at her carefully. Then you will have to show them. Words can open doors. But it is your choice to speak them. She nodded slowly. She knew it would not be easy. The council would not welcome this idea. They might try to silence it. But she also knew something inside her had already changed. She could not return to the way things were. The door of the art room opened. A young human worker entered to adjust the lights. He gave Lyra a friendly nod. She returned the nod without fear. She realized something simple. Connection did not need rules. It just needed honesty. She stood and walked back toward the window where she had first seen the stars. She looked at the endless dark sky. It was wide and deep. She had no longer felt as cold as before. She spoke without turning to Rian. When I return to the council, I will speak the word. I will not hide from it. Rian walked beside her. Then the world will start to change. Lyra took a slow breath. The air felt lighter now. She looked at the stars and saw something new. Not fear, not duty. Hope. She turned to Rian. If they do not listen, I will still speak. He nodded. That is enough. Change always begins with one voice. Music still played in the background. The flowers still stood on the table. The stars outside shone like a sea of silent watchers. Lyra stood tall with her silver skin shining in the light. She had made her choice. She would return to the Velen Council. She would speak the word that had once frozen her heart. But now it gave her strength. She would tell them what she had seen, what she had felt, and what she now knew. She walked out of the human section with calm steps. Rian followed at a distance, letting her lead her own path. The bridge between the two sections no longer felt like a border, felt like a road. The Velen guards at the entrance looked at her with cold eyes. She walked past them without fear. She had carried fear for too long. Now she carried something stronger. The council chamber was waiting for her. The cold stone and clear glass walls stood tall like always. But she no longer saw only cold. She saw space that could hold light. Inside her, the word echoed like a soft flame. Beautiful. It was no longer a sound. It was a force. It was a promise. And she was ready to speak it. The soft hum of Alaris station filled the air like a calm heartbeat. It was a sound that never stopped, a mix of power lines, air filters, and footsteps from 100 different species passing through the metallic halls. For most, it was just background noise. But for Rinla, it had become the sound of peace. Weeks had passed since she had stood before her people and defied their command. The decision had cost her her rank, her title, and the home she once knew. Yet, when she walked across the wide hangar now, dressed in simple work clothes instead of armor, she felt something she had never felt before: freedom. Across the hangar, Marin was bent over the open panel of a damaged shuttle, his sleeves rolled up and a smudge of oil across his cheek. He was humming quietly, lost in his work. When Rinla approached, he looked up and smiled. It was the same kind smile that had once disarmed her completely, the one that made her heart feel warm in a way she still did not fully understand. You are early, Marin said, setting down his wrench. The freighter isn't due for repairs until midday. Rinla tilted her head slightly. I finished my rounds early. I thought you might need help. Marin chuckled softly. You, helping a human with tools? The station might collapse from the shock. Her silver eyes narrowed, but her lips curved upward. Do not test me, human. I have mastered 3 new tools this week, only 3, he teased. You're slowing down. She lifted the small repair drone that floated beside her and pointed it at him. This one can chase you, you know? Aaron raised his hands in mock surrender. All right, all right. No need for violence. Let's get back to work.
Right.
They worked side by side, tightening panels and running diagnostics on the shuttle's reactor. Rinla's movements were steady and careful now. She had learned much from Marin: patience, precision, something deeper that could not be taught by words. While they worked, groups of traders and travelers passed through the hangar. Some stared for a moment when they saw a human and a Veari working together, but none said a word. The story of what happened, of how Rinla had stood up to her commanders and defended Maran, had spread across the outer systems. People whispered about it in marketplaces, in spaceports, even in Vieri fleets. Some called her a traitor. Others called her brave, but for Rinla, the labels no longer mattered. When the shuttle was finally powered again, a low hum filled the air. The reactor lights came on, glowing bright blue. Marin stepped back and wiped his hands on a cloth. "Another one done," he said. "That makes 5 this week. We might actually be catching up." Rinla nodded. "Your work pace is impressive for a human." He gave a tired smile. "And yours is faster than half the crew. We make a good team." She looked at him for a long moment. "A strange team," she said quietly, but her voice carried warmth. Later that evening, Station's Sky Dome opened for maintenance, revealing a vast stretch of stars outside. The hangar lights dimmed slightly, and the reflection of distant suns glimmered on the metal floor. Rinla and Marin stayed behind after their shift. Sitting near the wide observation window that looked out into the galaxy, cargo ships drifted slowly in the distance, their engines glowing like tiny fireflies against the darkness. Maran leaned back against the wall, watching the stars. "You know," he said, "when I first came here, I thought I'd only be fixing machines. I didn't think I'd end up part of a story people would talk about." "You did not expect to become known," Rinla said. He smiled. "I didn't even expect to survive some of those explosions." She let out a quiet laugh, a soft sound that made Marin's heart lift. He had heard her voice in battle, in command, in pain, but this sound was different. It was peace. Rinla looked out through the window, her eyes tracing the bright arc of a nebula far away. "My people will not forget what happened," she said. "Some may come for answers. Some may come for me." "Are you worried?" he asked. She shook her head slowly. "No, I am ready for them. I have no fear now. You taught me that courage is not in strength, but in choice." Marin turned his gaze to her. "You taught me too, Rinla. You showed me that even the strongest walls can break if someone has the heart to change." She studied him for a moment. "Humans and Viari are not so different," she said. "We both search for meaning. We both hide behind pride, but humans fight with something else." He smiled gently. "Hope." Rinla nodded. "Yes, hope. It is strange. Fragile, but it spreads like light." For a while, they sat in silence. The stars seemed to pulse gently beyond the glass, as if listening to their quiet words. As days turned to weeks, more ships began to arrive at Alaris Station, not just for repairs, but for learning. Viari engineers came to study human technology. Human officers came to understand alien designs. Rinla became a bridge between them. Her calm voice and steady hands guided both sides through confusion and mistrust. One day, a young Viari pilot approached her and asked, "Is it true you lost everything because of a human?" Rinla looked at the pilot calmly and replied, "No. I gained everything because I met one." The pilot did not know how to answer. He only bowed his head slightly and walked away, thinking deeply. Word of that exchange spread too, and soon other Viari began to see humans differently. A few even started calling Rinla the Bridge, though she never used the title herself. Marin continued to work beside her, quietly proud. He saw how she spoke to those who once looked at him with disdain and turned their doubts into understanding. She had become something more than a soldier. She had become a teacher, one evening after another long day. Moran found her sitting alone near the large window again. The lights were dim, and the stars shone bright and clear. He walked up quietly and sat beside her, thinking again. He asked. She nodded slowly. "Always. What about?" She took a deep breath. "When you first called me beautiful," she said softly, "I did not understand the word. I thought it was an empty sound, but I understand now." Marin's eyes softened. "Do you?" "Yes," she said. "It was not about appearance. It was about life. About the way you see others. You look at the broken and see worth. You look at the lost and see hope. That is what makes humans beautiful." Marin's heart felt warm at her words. He did not speak for a long time. The stars reflected in their eyes as the silence stretched between them, comfortable and peaceful. Finally, he said, "You're the one who showed me what beauty really is. It's not just light or color. It's courage. It's the moment someone decides to be kind, even when the world tells them not to be. Rinla turned her head slightly. You speak as if you are a philosopher now. He laughed. Maybe just a tired engineer with too much time to think. She looked at him for a moment longer, then smiled again. Not the small, uncertain smile from before, but a true one. It reached her eyes, softening them. For a long time, neither of them spoke. They simply watched as a human freighter drifted past, its white lights blinking in rhythm with the quiet hum of the station. The stars beyond glowed faintly in silver and blue, and for a brief second, it felt like the entire galaxy had paused to breathe. A few days later, the Council of Worlds sent envoys to the station. They wished to study the cooperation between human and Veyari crews. When they arrived, they found not just an alliance, but friendship, laughter in the hangar, shared meals, and people from two species learning side by side at the end of their visit. The lead envoy asked Rinla, "Do you believe this peace will last?" She answered without hesitation, "Yes, because it has already begun in the smallest place between two people who decided to see each other as equals." The envoy nodded, clearly moved. "Then perhaps our future is brighter than we thought." When the envoys left, Rinla and Marin stood together at the viewing window once more. The stars stretched endlessly before them, vast and full of promise. Rinla spoke softly. "Humans are strange, Marin. You fight with hope, not weapons." He smiled gently. "Maybe that's our best weapon." The hum of the station filled the silence that followed. Rinla looked out into the endless dark, her reflection glowing faintly in the glass. The universe felt larger now, but also warmer, as if something small and bright had been born in the void. She turned toward Moran and gave him a smile that held no fear, no hesitation. It was full of peace, trust, and quiet strength. The whisper that had once frozen her now lived in her heart, not as confusion, but as understanding. And in that vast sea of stars, two souls from different worlds sat side by side, knowing that something greater than war, rank, or power had begun between them. Something human, something eternal.